Hello. How you guys doing? Hopefully you guys are doing well. Justin Ramen Schneider, you got it correct. It was from Smash. So hopefully I don't get a copyright strike for that. I was kind of curious because it's not music, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm kind of not in the mood where I really don't care. So let's see if I can do this my way. So got all kinds of stuff I want to talk about today. As I was setting everything up, I kind of had this idea. I was going to do like an intro or something like that. And then I remembered that intro from the Smash album from Offspring. And it was kind of like what I was trying to replicate. So I figured I'd just play it. So, but hopefully you guys are all doing well. Hopefully you guys can hear me well. Go ahead and indulge if you guys can. Let's see. I'm pouring myself a drink right now. Mr. Johnny Boy. That is an amazing super chat. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Hey, I'm not really good at acknowledging people. You know, like for instance, I have patrons or I don't know what you call people that donate to you through Patreon. I think it's called patrons. And every once in a while I look at it. I set up a Patreon a long time ago. And because someone actually asked me to set it up and I kind of felt weird. But anyways, I just want to say thanks to the people that do donate whatever way that you guys can. I'm going to address something right now too, but thanks so much. I don't necessarily shout you guys out, and I probably need to do a better job of doing so, and I'll probably try to work on that for you guys. But thank you guys very much for those of you that have donated through Patreon or Super Chats or whatever. It's super awesome that you guys take your hard-earned money and give it to me. I realize that I'm giving you guys something, but to me, it just feels like I'm sharing something that kind of should be free anyways, which is knowledge, right? Because yes, we have to work to obtain knowledge, but knowledge helps everybody. And I'll get into my little thing right now, but yeah, it is apple juice, right? It's Oktoberfest apple juice tonight. So, you know, it's the season, right? 'Tis the season or something like that. Maybe that's not the right thing to say. But yeah, whatever, 'tis the season. So, but it's foamy apple juice too. But lately I've been like in a funk. I don't know if it's like a seasonal thing. I think it is. And there's something to, for those guys that make videos, Zach, I know you're in here. I don't know if you're still in here right now. You probably get in this too. But right now, I found myself getting really... I battle like depression and different things like that. That's a whole nother thing. I'm not going to go into that in this stream, but I've been obsessed with the numbers lately, and I realized that I need to stop. The numbers really don't matter. I was talking to my wife as I was driving today, and I was just telling her, like, I feel like I'm in a funk. You know, like I didn't release a video today, and because last night I was just thinking about it, and I just wasn't in the mood to make a video. And it's just because I've been kind of in a funk, but I'm super obsessed with the numbers and I need to stop. I'm almost tempted to go ahead and delete the YouTube Studio, which is the app that we use to like pay attention to the comments and the views and all that different stuff, because I find myself looking at it, you know, multiple times a day. I mean, stupid amounts, just staring at the numbers, and I need to stop because my wife reminded me. She said, look, she goes, you didn't start these videos because of the viewers and the subscribers. Because when I started these videos, I had no viewers and no subscribers. And I was just trying to start for my own employees. And I need to get back to that. It's really easy to kind of veer off and start getting obsessed with the numbers. And I need to stop. So anyways, I don't know why I told you guys that, but whatever. So I have a couple things I want to talk about tonight. Lots of questions that I want to address. I definitely want to get to your guys' questions in the chat. I've also got you guys, these super chats. So thank you so very much. It's really, really awesome. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. I'm going to continue to do these super chats or not, because that's not why I started doing these videos, but it does help. So thank you very much. Okay. Take a break. I am going to take a break. I'm actually, work permitting, I'm going to get away this weekend. We're going to go up to Mammoth Lakes. My wife got Friday off. She's a waitress. So anyway, she got Friday off, and we're going to probably take the kids out of school early. I'm going to try to take off work early, and we're going to get away for 2 days. It's not a lot, but we're going to go up to Mammoth Lakes, which is like a super chill mountain community. There's no snow up there or anything like that. It's a ski community or whatever, but we're going to try to get up there just for 2 days or 1 day or whatever it is. We're going to drive up Friday afternoon and just try to relax, detox for a little while, breathe some mountain air, get away from this craziness. So, like I said, I got a lot of stuff I want to address. And again, thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it. For those of you that deal with it, I'm gonna just talk about it really quick. I don't want to bog these streams down with like sad and all that different stuff, but for those of you that deal with depression, anxiety, all those different things, it's real. I think we need to talk about it a little bit more. I think that people need to not be so secretive about that kind of stuff, because it does affect a lot of people. And it's very important that we talk about that kind of stuff, because I'm not dark or anything like that. I'm not going anywhere bad. It's just one of those things. I think it's just a seasonal thing. But everybody, you guys need to talk about that stuff, okay? You know, talk to your spouses, your friends, your family, whatever it is. Just talk to them. So, right on. Okay, so let's get to real stuff. One of the questions that I had, and I'm going to address some stuff with the last video that I uploaded too, but one of the questions that I wanted to address was, I had a viewer named Brandon that had asked me about checking superheat on a freezer unit. And his question was, can you check superheat when your evaporator is frosted up? And his logic was pretty smart. He said, look, he goes, supermarket systems are always frosted up. He goes, so I'm curious, his question was about checking superheat when there's frost on the coil. So my answer to Brandon's question is that you need to be very cautious about checking superheat. Yes, it is natural on a freezer coil that there is going to be frost, so long as the frost is not obstructing the airflow. Remember that your evaporator coil is taking the refrigerant and it's absorbing the heat from the box. So it is normal for there to be frost on a freezer coil, but at some point that frost is going to become so thick that it's going to slow down the airflow, and the evaporator is no longer going to absorb as much heat as it could, okay? Remember that ice and frost typically is 32 degrees. So once you get enough frost on that coil, it starts to act as an insulator, and it keeps that evaporator coil at, you know, around 32 degrees, because that's at what point ice freezes. So once you get so much ice on there and it starts to build up a block, then yes, it's going to obstruct the airflow and it's going to cause some issues. So you need to be careful about that. It's a fine line, okay? So I typically don't like to check superheat when a coil is frosted up. So in a perfect world, what I would suggest you do is, if you do have a frost situation, of course they tell you to check superheat when the box is near or at temperature. So what I suggest is let the box come down close to temperature, put the unit into a defrost, then turn it back on after the defrost, let it come down a little bit more, then check the superheat. I know it's not always practical, okay, but on a freezer system, on an initial pull down, you'll tend to have frost buildup on the evaporator coil, okay? So it's important to go ahead and get rid of that frost. So throw it into a quick defrost. Once it's out of the defrost, let it run for 10 minutes. It'll probably be close to box temp, then check your superheat, okay, Brandon? So hopefully that answers your question, and we'll get to some more of these other ones. Evan, dude, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. You guys, these super chats are awesome. Thank you so very much, okay? I've got a new movie quote in there today for the Nightbot. I don't know if it's popped it in yet. Let's see. No, it doesn't. Okay, so it doesn't look like the Nightbot has popped in the movie quote yet. This movie is going to be a very obscure movie. You kind of got to have a perverted sense of humor if you've watched this movie. Okay, so let's see if you guys can guess. It'll pop it in sometime during the stream. I think I have it set to like 28 minutes or something like that, and there's 4 quotes. It's kind of a difficult one. I'd be kind of curious if any of you have ever seen this movie or know what the movie is. So pay attention to the Nightbot's comments once it comes in, okay? I will definitely try to get to your guys' questions in the comment section too. So do me a favor and put your questions in caps lock, and myself and Justin, the moderator, will try to pay attention to your questions. Don't hesitate to repost your questions if I don't answer them, okay? Even if I can't answer them, I'll usually address it and say, hey, I'm not going to answer it during this stream or something. So you're not going to hurt our feelings if you post a question 2 times, okay? All right, let's see what else we got in here. Let's see. Okay, another good thing. Okay, so I had a video that I posted about one of those epic service calls again where it turned into a disaster. They called me, the restaurant. They said multiple regions were down. Usually that means multiple regions aren't down. We get that a lot. But then we go out there and it actually was multiple regions down. We had multiple issues, refrigerant leaks, compressor issues, all kinds of stuff. Inevitably, I ended up having to repair a leak and change a compressor. It was a headache. You guys can watch the video. I'm not going to cover the whole thing inside of here. But one of the really important things that I want to cover, and I have it on my bullet list right here that I want to talk about, is pulling a perfect vacuum. Okay, remember, when we're servicing equipment, there's installation, new installation, and there's service. Okay, it's very difficult to pull a perfect vacuum on a system that you're servicing. So it's been operating for many years. You repair a leak, especially when you have multiplex system. And a multiplex is basically you have multiple evaporators with multiple circuits with one or a single system controlling it. It may not necessarily be one compressor. You may have tandem compressors or triple compressors, who knows? But you have multiple evaporators, multiple circuits meaning multiple temperature controllers, multiple solenoid valves shutting the systems off. On systems like that, we have refrigerant leaks all the time. Okay, refrigerant leaks are a natural thing. They happen. Pulling a perfect vacuum, servicing a system that's multiplexed is not obtainable usually, okay? Most systems leak, and that's just something that happens with refrigerants. That's why the EPA and all those fancy police people, whatever, are trying to get rid of refrigerants that are, quote unquote, hazardous to the environment and all that good stuff, whatever you believe, or global warming, BS, all that, whatever, okay? I'm not going to get political, but so pulling a vacuum on a system that's multiplex is very difficult, okay? Especially if you're doing a pump down. So in my situation, I pumped the system down. So that means while it was running, I front seated the king valve on the receiver. So that stopped the refrigerant flow coming out of the receiver. And it basically just pulled all the refrigerant out of the low side of the system. And then I'm able to work on the low side of the system. Well, in that situation, I repaired my leak, but I was pretty confident that I still had leaks in the system, and it's not always possible that we get to fix systems like that, okay? You've got multiple leaks. You may not solve them all. It's just life. Sometimes systems leaks. At this point in time in the United States, it is not illegal to repair a system that has refrigerant leaks so long as it doesn't contain more than, I think the number is 50 pounds of refrigerant or something like that. Once it contains over a certain threshold, then yes, you have to document and repair the leaks and all that. You have to make an effort to repair the leaks and all that good stuff. But on a system this small, it is what it is, and you just got to do what you got to do to get the customer going. They have multiple systems. You got to get them running. So you're not necessarily always going to pull the perfect vacuum. I try as hard as I can to pull a proper vacuum, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just got to pull it down, get most of the air out of the system, and start it back up. What does that lead to? That leads to low compressor life. That leads to moisture issues. That leads to all kinds of stuff, okay? But those are things we battle all the time. It's very interesting because on the supermarket side, they deal with that kind of stuff all the time, okay? There's always leaks on systems and different things like that. They have to try to fix them as much as possible because they have systems that contain large amounts of refrigerant, but there's always going to be leaks in our system. You're never going to have a completely leak-free. So when you're trying to pull a vacuum, you want to do your best. You want to put your best effort out there. You want to try as hard as you can to make sure that systems are operating properly. Even when, like for instance, even when you know that the system still has leaks, you want to do your best, okay? You want to pull a vacuum. Don't be one of those guys that just blows and goes, just opens up the valve, purges out the system, and then just lets it run. You do your best, okay? But also at the same time, if your system has leaks and you're pulling a vacuum, at some point, you're going to pull air into the system. So you kind of have to, it is kind of a gamble to figure out when that number is, so I am not a perfect technician. I make mistakes. I have to deal with customers' time constraints, all kinds of stuff, okay? So understand that my videos are, I don't know that they're necessarily meant to be educational. I know you guys take them as educational, but I mean, it's more of a, this is how I do things. Remember that my videos really, in essence, are for my employees, and I share them with you guys too, so that way you guys can see how I do things, okay? So again, I'm not the perfect technician, but I do the best that I can. So, all right, we addressed that. We addressed that, I should say. Okay, so Bryce Kirschenberg, you ask, does the 25 to 30 degrees above head pressure rule of thumb work on all refrigerants? It's not the refrigerant. Okay, so I'm assuming, because you're saying 25 to 30 degrees above head pressure, I'm assuming that you're talking condensing temp over ambient, okay? And that is a rule of thumb that we use, estimating what our condensing temp should be. Okay, so it's condensing temp over ambient. So if you, by rule of thumb, if you have 100-degree ambient temperature, theoretically, your condensing temp should be 25 to 30 degrees over ambient temperature. So that really depends on the type of equipment you're working on and the efficiency of the equipment. Okay, if it's a microchannel condenser, which we are starting to see in a lot of refrigeration equipment, you're typically going to be 20 to 25 degrees above ambient on your condensing temp. If it's a tube and fin condenser, so that's a standard copper tube condenser with aluminum fins or steel fins, whatever they are, you're typically going to be 25 to 30 degrees above ambient. So it's not necessarily dependent on the refrigerant, all right, and it's mostly dependent on the efficiency of the condenser. But as we get some new refrigerants that have higher glides, there's some weird stuff going on in there, okay? But for the most part, no, it's not dependent on the refrigerant. It's just dependent on the equipment. So a rule of thumb. So that means this isn't the set in stone number. It's if you can't get a hold of the manufacturer to tell you what your condensing temp should be, it's safe to say if you have a tube and fin condenser, you're going to be 25 to 30 degrees above ambient, condensing temp over ambient, okay? That's your liquid saturation temperature, the difference between the ambient temperature and your liquid saturation temperature, okay? And if you have a microchannel condenser, it's typically going to be 20 to 25 degrees, condensing temp over ambient, okay? So be cautious about that. Always lean on the manufacturer, talk to them, see what they have to say, and then go from there, okay? Let's see what else. Ralph. I see Ralph. He's Dallas fan in here. Ralph works for Honeywell Refrigerants. I sent someone your way a few minutes ago. Someone had asked for your email, Ralph. If any of you guys, Ralph is always in here in these streams. He's always willing to lend a hand to different refrigerant-related questions. Like I said, he works for Honeywell Refrigerants. He's always willing to help you guys with conversions and best practices when converting refrigerants, all that good stuff. I'm going to put Ralph's email in the chat right now. He's a really cool guy, and he's, like I said, he's always willing to help. So I'm going to post his email right now. That's in there right now. Send him an email if you guys have any questions about any of the retrofit refrigerants, any of that good stuff. Okay, Ralph's always a good guy, willing to help everybody in there. So definitely. Okay, Mr. Ice, you ask a really good question. Curious HVAC is also asking the same question. And Mr. Ice said, why do scroll compressors have liquid injection and how does it affect pump down? Okay, really good question. So first off, we got to understand the difference between a DTC valve, okay, and liquid injection. There's a couple different methods of liquid injection. So it's not necessarily always with scroll compressors, okay? Let's talk about a TREV, temperature responsive expansion valve. A temperature responsive expansion valve is a valve used, and this really came out when R22 became popular as a medium temperature, and in the very beginning, R22 was kind of a popular low temperature refrigerant too. They quickly realized there was some problems with using R22 as a low temperature refrigerant, but in the beginning, they were using it, okay? So when 502 was being replaced, before, I guess I should say, it was a little bit before my time, but R22 was starting to be used as a medium temperature and low temperature refrigerant. And what they realized was with R22 refrigerants, they ran higher discharge temperatures. So that's the discharge line temperature or discharge gas temperature ran much higher with R22 refrigerants. So they quickly realized that they needed to do something because what they were finding was the discharge temperature was so high, it was causing oil breakdown within the system. So they came up with a TREV, a temperature responsive expansion valve, okay? And before, so I'll get to the scroll compressor section, but before they were just still using hermetic piston-driven compressors and semi-hermetic piston-driven compressors, and they were still seeing high discharge temperatures, and they were having issues with that. So they came up with the temperature-responsive expansion valve, and essentially that was a de-superheating expansion valve, okay? So an expansion valve that took liquid refrigerant, metered it into the suction line, and cooled off the head of the compressor, okay? It's just because of the science behind R22 refrigerant, it ran high discharge temperatures, okay? So they came up with that temperature responsive expansion valve, and it helped them to cool down the discharge gas temperature, okay? So again, they took liquid refrigerant off of the liquid line, and they ran it into an expansion valve, and they metered it into the suction line, okay? So that was the older system. The newer scroll compressors, they still use liquid injection. There's two different methods. They'll use a capillary tube type liquid injection, but then they'll also use a temperature responsive liquid injection. Copeland compressors use it on their scroll compressors. It's not just with R22 anymore. They use it on 404A. And now that we're going back to the more popular R448A and the 449 refrigerants are very similar to R22. So they run excessively high discharge temperatures again. So we have a temperature responsive expansion valve, but the Copeland compressors actually got smart and they realized that they were having issues with, I have a brain fart here for a second. They were having issues with compression ratios. Okay. They were having really high compression ratios with the scroll compressors. And then you add in the low temp gases, the low temp box temperatures, right? And then you had high compression ratios, and that was causing high discharge temps. So they added a DTC valve. Copeland uses it on their low temp compressors. It's a discharge temperature controlled valve. Okay. Essentially, it's an expansion valve that it has a rotolock fitting on the side of the Copeland compressor. I'm going to show you guys a picture because I'm not smart and don't have it. But this would be a scroll compressor with a DTC valve right here, okay? And what that does is it's the same thing as a TREV, okay? It takes a liquid line refrigerant, a solid column of liquid, just like an expansion valve downstairs, and it meters it into the crankcase of the compressor to help cool off the discharge gas in the system, okay? So it's because of the properties of the refrigerant, and the high compression ratios, they were having over temp issues within the compressor. They added that DTC valve. It's a very common thing. Curious HVAC guy had actually asked something about it. I had mentioned it and showed it in my video of the compressor that I had just changed. It's very common when you see a low temp scroll compressor where you'll see a DTC valve on there. Okay. On the DTC valve, because it has a capillary tube, and I will actually show this picture again. So there's a capillary tube that comes off of the valve right here, and it goes into the head of the compressor right here below this plastic cap. And that capillary tube senses the head of the compressor. And when the temperature gets high enough, it opens the valve and then it closes the valve. So with a DTC valve, which is very common on the Copeland compressors, you have no issues with pumping down because it's only going to open when the discharge temperature or the head of the compressor gets so hot that it's going to bypass, or it's going to meter the refrigerant into the suction side. Okay. Now, when you get into some of the newer, you'll notice it on the newer Heatcraft condensing units, they have a liquid injection valve that uses a capillary tube. In that situation, if you're using the capillary tube type liquid injection, you will have to have a current sensing relay and a solenoid valve that shuts off the flow, okay? Because the DTC valve uses the head of the compressor's temperature, or it senses the temperature and it only opens when the temperature gets high. When you're pumping down the system, you're theoretically that valve's not going to be bypassing, okay? So it doesn't affect the pump down situation. But on a capillary tube style system where it's using a liquid injection via a capillary tube, it's always going to be feeding refrigerant, okay? So we use a current sensing relay that senses the current of the compressor, and what it does is whenever the compressor's running, it opens a solenoid valve that allows refrigerant to meter into the crankcase of the compressor and cool off the head of the compressor, and that's on scroll compressors, okay? Sporlan makes a TREV. They have a Bulletin 10-10-2, and this is just a diagram of a Y1037 temperature responsive valve, okay? This is an aftermarket method. You can use this on a non-scroll compressor, or you can use it on a scroll compressor that doesn't have the port for a DTC valve, okay? It goes upstairs before the compressor. In certain situations, if you read the documentation, it says that you can put a liquid line solenoid valve and a current sensing relay on a temperature responsive expansion valve, a TREV, but you don't have to because in theory, it only bypasses when the head of the compressor gets too hot. So if you're pumping down the system, the head of the compressor is going to cool down and the valve's going to stop bypassing, okay? But some people can choose to put those in. Hopefully that answers your guys' questions. Adam Showers, I see yours popped up right now. Why do you scroll compressors overheat more than reciprocating compressors? And it's just the nature of the design of the compressor and the high compression ratios that cause that. If you want me to answer more than that, we're going to have to get a Copeland person on here to talk about why they overheat more. But I do know that scroll compressors definitely are more efficient. Okay, but yes, I have noticed that they tend to get hotter than a normal reciprocating piston-driven compressor. But it all has to do with the compression ratios and how efficient the compressor is. So, HVAC rookie, dude, badass. Are you the first person to catch that? Because I haven't been paying attention to it. But yes, it is the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So, awesome, dude. I was curious if anybody was going to get that. Awesome, dude. Let's see. Guys, I see lots of questions popping up in there. Post some more questions. So repost them if I miss them. Okay. Dallas fan, I see that you say that R448A has a lower discharge temp than R22, so it may not be required depending on where you are located. Always check with the compressor manufacturer. Ralph, that is a really good point. Okay, guys, you always want to check with the compressor manufacturers. You want to talk to them. I personally have been using R448A, and that is a Honeywell brand of refrigerant. I know that R449 is very similar, but it's just a different mixture. I've done many Heatcraft condensing unit installations with R448A, but they already had DTC valves, or they actually had liquid injection via capillary tubes, because if you get a Heatcraft unit, they come with that. I have done some conversions on R448A, where I just had a piston-driven compressor, just a normal hermetic piston-driven compressor, and I haven't had to do any compressor cooling, and we made it through the summer without any problems, okay? So it really depends on your location and what you're going to be dealing with. So let's see what else. Awesome. Hopefully I answered your question there, Mr. Ice. So Kelly Kyler, I'm not like an encyclopedia. I had plenty of warning. It's funny that Mr. Ice asked that question, because Curious HVAC Guy had happened to ask me the same question during over the weekend, and I had just been researching about these DTC valves and the temperature responsive expansion valves myself too. So guys, I myself get confused about stuff and curious about stuff too, just like you. And I just research. I ask the Google, right? We were having a party one time and a buddy was talking or something like that, and he said the phrase, dude, just ask the Google. And it made me laugh, because the simpleness, I guess that's not really a word, but the simplicity, I guess, is the right way to say that, of that phrase, ask the Google, right? Because we can ask the Google anything now. Before Google, we had all these books, right? And my van had a crap ton of books inside of it. Now I don't even have to have the books, because I have it all on my phone. It's kind of a trip how all that works. So, all right. So, out of curiosity, I had some parents that let me do some things when I was a little kid that I probably shouldn't have done. And I think I first watched the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is the comment or the movie quote that I put in there today. I think I was about 10 years old when I watched the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I just thought it was a musical and it was fun. I did not understand anything about what was going on in the Rocky Horror Picture Show until I was... Gosh, I mean, I don't think I watched it again. I remember watching it when I was 10. I probably didn't watch it again until I was 17 or 18. And then I realized, oh, dude, this is a movie about transvestite aliens that are coming to the U.S. and, invading our planet. And that was a trip. That was so bizarre. I would not let my 10-year-old watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show now. So, yeah, things were different, I guess. I don't know. Or my parents were just really liberal and let me do anything I wanted. It's weird. All right, let's see what else. Okay, Dave, you asked DTC valves and Copeland short cycling. So you shouldn't be short cycling. It shouldn't be the DTC valve. Okay. But if your DTC valve is causing short cycling, it is possible. Okay. There's usually some other issues that are causing the head of the compressor to get so hot that it's making the DTC valve open up. Right. But if you're worried about that, what Copeland actually recommends, if you read in the Copeland documentation, what I'm going to suggest is that you guys download Copeland Bulletin, and I'm going to post it in here right now, AE4-1425R4. They have a couple different bulletins, and I'm going to post it in the chat right now. This is the Copeland Bulletin number. If you guys download this, it's going to talk about all kinds of stuff with the Copeland compressors. There's different bulletins. This is an engineering bulletin from Copeland. This is the one that I just recommended right now. Okay. But again, I posted it in the chat. Ernesto, HVAC or blogger, you asked when the next giveaway is. I don't know. What do you guys want me to give away? I did a Sporlan BQ kit giveaway a while back, and that was a pain in the butt because I realized how difficult it was to do giveaways. The problem with giveaways, guys, is that I have so many international viewers, and it's so I can't ship internationally because of the costs and different things. So I don't know. If you guys want me to give something away, let me know what you want to give away. I mean, I may say no, but put it in there. Let's see what's up. So download that Copeland application bulletin, AE4-1425R4, and there's lots of good reading inside there about the DTC valves and how they work. If you're worried, Copeland recommends to go ahead and install the current sensing relay and the liquid line and a solenoid valve, and basically we'll make sure that the DTC valve doesn't bypass in certain situations. You can also install a hand valve or a shutoff valve before with the refrigerant going to the DTC valve. So that way, if you're having issues pumping down a compressor, you can shut the refrigerant flow off going to the DTC valve. Okay. So there's all kinds of different methods you can do. I personally have never had a problem with a liquid injection or a DTC valve. I should say DTC valve or TREV, temperature responsive expansion valve, bypassing while I was trying to pump a system down. And I run in pretty hot ambience. Okay, my summertime temps on my extreme high is 120 degrees. My normal high is 100 degree ambient. So on a regular, I'm running 130 degree discharge temp, 130 degree condensing temp, or 140 degree condensing temp. And I don't have issues pumping systems down. My DTC valves aren't bypassing. But if you're having those kind of issues, you either have a problem there or you need to install some kind of a hand valve or shut off before the DTC valve to slow the refrigerant flow to it. So, HVAC rookie, Redfish versus Fluke. What is the difference besides price? Okay, so a Fluke meter is a I have a couple Fluke meters. I don't use them very much. I have a bench meter right over here. You guys see it posted over there, and it's obviously sitting right there, so I haven't had it in my van lately. And I have a Fluke 902. I honestly don't use it very much. I use my Fieldpiece SC660, but I also have the Redfish clamp meter. I honestly don't use the Redfish clamp meter very much. The only reason why I have the Redfish clamp meter is because I'm a tool whore, and I wanted it to be able to connect with Measure Quick. When I have tools that don't work with Measure Quick, I saw these options that I couldn't use, and it was the electrical measurements and different things. But honestly, I bought the Redfish meter, and I used it like 2 or 3 times, and then I never used it again. I'm not talking crap about the Redfish meter, but it does have some features that I don't like. The lack of a magnet is a huge issue. But what is the difference between a Fluke and a Redfish? I have to say that the Redfish meter, all the documentation that I've read on it, it's a very, very highly accurate meter. For a low-cost meter, the Redfish meter is actually very, very accurate. So, but a Fluke meter has always been known to be really high quality, but they're also really, really expensive. Okay, so what's the difference? Cost, really, between the Redfish and the Fluke, in my opinion. But convenience and different things are going to be lost too, because the Redfish, there's some things that I really don't like about it. Like the clamp is a little bit big. The leads are a little cumbersome, but, I don't use my Fluke on a daily basis. Like I said, I use the Fieldpiece SC660. So, curious HVAC guy, you ask about de-superheating expansion valves. Well, a TREV, a temperature responsive expansion valve, is a de-superheating expansion valve in essence, okay? But most situations, and I don't deal with these very much, but I understand the concept. The most commonly you're going to see a de-superheating expansion valve is on a system that has like discharge bypass, okay? Discharge bypass valve, I'll show one right now. This is an example of a discharge bypass valve that I cut open, okay, and then I have a little Sporlan thing. I think I've showed this before. You guys aren't going to be able to see this right now, but with the SMA 12 by Sporlan, it's basically a controller that you can open and close the expansion valves and discharge bypass valves. Anything that has a stepper motor, if you hook it up right, you can open and close it and see if it's actually working. But anyways, that was off on a tangent. In a situation where you have a desuperheating expansion valve, you're typically going to see it on a system that has a discharge bypass valve. It might be for capacity control, unloaders, different things like that, okay? Situations where, let's say you have parallel compressors or a compressor that you don't want to shut off because of the inrush current that's used when you start up the compressor, you can put a discharge bypass valve on there. That's going to basically, when the system capacity gets really low, it's going to continue to let the compressor run by opening up the discharge bypass valve, but you can't take discharge gas and dump it right into the suction line. So you're going to take a desuperheating expansion valve and meter that refrigerant back into the suction line. So that way you don't kill the compressor with hot discharge gas. Okay. That's a situation. You may see it more in the supermarket side. I really can't talk much about the supermarket side because I have no business talking about that. I don't work on that kind of stuff. But I have seen desuperheating expansion valves on parallel compressor systems. So where you have two compressors, one common suction line. And basically, I've had refrigeration systems at a restaurant where you've got two compressors. You always have one compressor running and they don't turn it off because they don't want to see that inrush current to save energy. So they'll use a discharge bypass valve and a temperature or a desuperheating expansion valve to meter the refrigerant back into the suction line. So basically they'll take the discharge gas, even though the liquid line solenoid valves for all the circuits downstairs are closed, the compressor continues to run because they take that discharge gas, they meter it through an expansion valve, dump it right back into the suction line. So it's kind of like a closed loop until the capacity in the system is required to increase. Then they'll close the discharge bypass valve. So hopefully that answers your question there, Bill. I don't have a lot of knowledge on desuperheating expansion valves, but I do know that a TREV or a temperature responsive expansion valve is in essence a desuperheating expansion valve. Okay. And it's just metering the refrigerant back into the suction line. So let's see. Oh, cool. I see a comment there right now. And I want to address that because my daughter was super stoked. I saw someone comment about the VW bug behind me. Okay. So I posted on social media that my daughter was building me a little Mustang. It's super awesome. This is a Lego. It's made out of Legos, guys. This is really cool. My daughter, she's 10 years old. She's super into Legos and she loves to build them. And I've been wanting this Mustang. This is like my dream car. I think this is like a 67. Yeah, 67 Mustang GT. But anyway, she built this for me out of Legos. Okay. If you guys haven't done this, it's super fun to do with your kids. I helped her a little bit, but she did like all the work. And then she has built this before, which is her VW bus or microbus, which is also one of my dream cars. I've always wanted a VW bus. She built this out of Legos. And then for her birthday, which just passed, my wife and I got her this VW Bug, which she just built too, which is super cool because she likes to do these and I love to help her a little bit with them. And then I'm a fan of all three of these cars. Well, I never really wanted a VW Bug, to be honest with you. My wife's always wanted one of these, a convertible, but I want a Volkswagen bus and a 67 Mustang for sure. So I put those right there because she was super stoked. She wanted me to point them out to you guys. So let me turn my fan on right here because I'm dying over here. There we go. I got a fan blowing on me right now. All right, let's see what else we can get to here. What else? Okay, so I've got some other things on my list right here that I want to address, and I'm going to address them. So I don't know who asked me this question. I think it might have been you, Curious HVAC guy, but someone asked me how big the reach-ins were that the Hvacr rack had controlled. So in my video, we had a compressor and a refrigerant leak, and I want to say they have a custom cooks line downstairs in that particular restaurant. Some of you may know which restaurant it is, but I try not to mention names. But they have a custom cooks line that's probably about 40 feet long, and it probably, between the entire cooks line, there's two systems that control it. And I want to say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's about 10 evaporator coils within it with all quarter-ton TXVs controlling it. So it's a pretty big custom island cooks line or whatever that rack had controlled. So, but the rack also controls walk-ins and walk-in freezers and all different things like that. So, okay. So the next thing I want to get into. Ernesto, HVACR vlogger, you said I watch TGE van life videos if you like those. I honestly don't. I'll have to look and see. I've watched a few van videos, but I don't know if I've watched TGE van life. So, okay, the next thing I want to cover, Thomas. Thomas had asked me to explain head pressure control valves or headmasters. Okay. And I want to go ahead and talk about a head pressure control valve. Okay, headmaster is a common thing that we call a head pressure control valve. But headmaster, if I understand it correctly, is actually the trade name of Alco or Emerson's head pressure control valve. Okay, Sporlan, which is my favorite brand of valves, basically to use. Okay, even the fact that that they are my sponsor has nothing to do with that. I love Sporlan products, okay? So this is a Sporlan head pressure control valve. I've done a cutaway on this valve, basically where I took the components out, cut the valve open, okay? These are often misunderstood valves, okay? A lot of people blame head pressure control valves for being the problem when really they're not. Head pressure control valves, in my opinion, okay, this is just my opinion, I have no scientific evidence, the majority of the failures of a head pressure control valve is simply because of system contamination. Yes, there's the very rare times that you have the power head essentially, or the head, the sensing element goes bad, okay, that does and can happen, okay, but it's very often, in my opinion, that head pressure control valves go bad because of system contamination, okay. So essentially, what the head pressure control valve does, it's meant there, or it's in the system to basically maintain a head pressure in the system. And the reason why we need to maintain a head pressure is so that we can have a constant pressure drop across our expansion valve. This is a cutaway of an expansion valve for a Sporlan system, okay? And the way an expansion valve works is it needs to have liquid refrigerant, pure solid column of liquid refrigerant coming into the valve. And then based off of the temperature of the suction line coming out of the evaporator coil, it meters refrigerant into the suction line through the valve, okay? Now, think about this valve, okay? Let's try to break this valve down, okay? Think of a sprinkler in your house. If you have really low water pressure, your sprinkler on your grass is going to shoot not very far, right? It's not going to shoot as far as if you have higher water pressure. If you are higher, yeah, I guess that's the right way to say it. So if you have higher water pressure, your sprinkler is going to shoot far or further. I'm not talking correctly today, okay? Anyways, you guys understand the concept of what I'm trying to say. Think of it as water pressure in a sprinkler, okay? The more pressure you have, the farther the sprinkler is going to shoot. An expansion valve, and again, what I'm trying to break down for you guys is that an expansion valve works. It needs to have a certain pressure drop. It needs to have a certain amount of pressure coming to the valve so it can maintain a certain amount of pressure coming out of the valve, okay? It has to have a margin of error because you have a sensing bulb and it's going to select and it's going to open and close the valve. An interesting way to think of an expansion valve is a constant superheat valve. It's there to maintain the superheat coming out of the evaporator, right? The lower the superheat, the more efficient the evaporator is. But there's a point at which you get too low and it becomes a problem. The higher the superheat, the less efficient the evaporator is. So a head pressure control valve, everything in your system, when you think about a system, the way that it works is it's just like a giant system, you know. I don't know what I'm thinking there. I'm kind of losing my train of thought there. But think of the human body, okay? You've got a heart that pumps the refrigerant. That's your compressor. You've got veins, basically, that let the blood flow through your body. Okay, with the compressor running in the system, you have to have an expansion valve that allows the refrigerant to flow into the evaporator, okay? You have to have a constant pressure drop across this expansion valve. You have a small margin of error for the amount of pressure drop you can have across this valve, but we have a head pressure control valve there to regulate the amount of pressure drop. The head pressure control valve is meant as a low ambient control. As your ambient temperatures drop, your head pressure goes down. If you guys understand the correspondence between your outdoor ambient temperature and the refrigerant pressure, if you guys, if you break it down to the easiest sense, as your ambient temperature goes up, your head pressure goes up, right? So a head pressure control valve is there to maintain a pressure drop across your expansion valve. So if we keep the head pressure at a constant head pressure, a certain level, basically, we're going to keep the amount of pressure going to the expansion valve there. If the pressure gets too low going to the expansion valve, then your expansion valve is going to not work correctly, okay? Now, that's with a thermostatically controlled expansion valve, okay? This is a thermostatically controlled expansion valve. It has a sensing element on it. When you get into electronic expansion valves, we can float the head pressure, and we oftentimes will have lower bypass settings on the head pressure control valve. So this particular head pressure control valve, I'm pretty sure based on the bypass setting, I don't know if you guys can read that. Nah, probably not, but it says 240 PSI. So this is more than likely out of an ice machine, is my thought, because ice machines oftentimes require a constant head pressure because of hot gas defrost, okay? So there's all kinds of situations. Now, in a refrigeration system, we need a certain head pressure. It's actually a rather small envelope at which refrigeration properly operates, okay? So I would say basically between 70 degrees and 100 degrees. Anything over 100 degrees, you're going to start to have efficiency drop-offs, and anything below 70 degrees, you're going to start to have efficiency drop-offs, okay? So that small envelope of 30 degrees, basically, between 70 and 100 degrees ambient temperature, is when a refrigeration system operates optimal, okay? As you drop below that 70-degree ambient, that's where a head pressure control valve comes into play. It basically bypasses the refrigerant flow coming out of the condenser and dumps refrigerant directly into the receiver. Now, I'm going to post a video link right now where I kind of explain and help you to visualize that process, okay? So let me post a video link here. You guys feel free to finish out the stream and then come back to the chat, and you'll be able to click on this video link. And I basically have temperature clamps on the liquid line, the discharge line, and I show what happens when we don't have enough refrigerant in the system and the head pressure control valve is bypassing in different issues like that, okay? So I'm kind of going off on a tangent. Hopefully I explained your question there, and or I answered your question, Thomas, about the head pressure control valve, okay? Let's see. Prime time. Prime time. Okay, so great point. Prime time says head pressure control valve, no. Fan cycle, yes. Okay, so fan cycling is another way or another method of head pressure control. It is a valid method of head pressure control. Again, it's doing the same exact thing. It's there to maintain a constant pressure drop across your expansion valve. Remember, the expansion valve is everything to the system. The compressor pumps, but the expansion valve meters the refrigerant into the evaporator coil, okay? So if we don't have a certain amount of pressure coming into the expansion valve and a certain amount of pressure going out of the expansion valve, there's nothing there to drive the refrigerant through the valve. We need that refrigerant to be driven through at a certain pressure drop, basically, okay? The expansion valve is a pressure drop device. It creates a pressure drop within the system and allows us to absorb heat in the evaporator coil, okay? Hopefully that answers that. Adam Showers, how high are compression ratios in scroll compressors? And the vapor saturation temperature is high, the blower fans are fine, and the pressures are 130-10, and it's low and ambient is low. Adam Showers, I need a little more context to your question there. Feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I'll be sure to answer your question a little bit better, because I need some more information, some more context to that. So, when you're missing oil and it's not in the TXV, how would you remove it, or would you just leave it? HVAC Rookie. Okay, so that's a question basically for my last video where my compressor was low on oil and I want to know where it is. Okay, oil has to go somewhere. It doesn't just disappear within a system, okay? Even if you have oil breaking down, getting too hot, it's still going to go somewhere. Most of the time, oil is going to go down to the evaporator coil, and it's going to get stuck because oftentimes in my situation in my previous video, we had poor oil return, and that was an issue, okay? And that particular system is a compressor killer. I've said the reasons why that's a compressor killer, but essentially you have multiple circuits in a multiplex system. Whenever the bottom section evaporators satisfy, which is very common for them to satisfy, the pan chiller section up top is still running, but the pan chiller section is usually about 2,000 BTUs when you figure we have like a 2 horsepower compressor. So there's a possibility of only a 2000 BTU evaporator running when you still have a 2 horsepower compressor, that's not enough refrigerant coming back to the system. That's not enough refrigerant velocity to bring any trapped oil downstairs back up to the system. So I call that a compressor killer because oftentimes that'll cause overheat issues. It'll cause oil return issues. That's something that we have that's very common in multiplex systems. Is I call them compressor killers, okay? And in a situation like that, you just got to change the compressor every 3 years. The question is, how do we get that oil back up to the compressor? Well, oftentimes when we put a new compressor into there, when it's under a heavy load, that oil is going to return back up to the compressor, and you're actually going to have to drain some oil out of the compressor because it'll be overfilled with oil, which will cause some issues. If that oil doesn't return to the compressor, you can try changing evaporator coils, pulling. I mean, it's literally just a matter of taking the evaporator coil out of the picture, pouring the evaporator coil out, seeing if oil comes out. Taking the liquid line going into the evaporator coil and kind of dipping it down, seeing if some oil comes out. There's not a really good way to get oil back up to the roof once it's gotten downstairs. It's just kind of a crappy situation. In our instance, my evaporator coils, let's just say I have one evaporator coil running. That evaporator coil might only be 3,000 BTUs, and it has 2 3/8-inch lines going to it. That's not enough velocity to take any oil back all the way up to that compressor. Interestingly enough, that compressor has an 1.125" suction line, but it has the possibility of just one evaporator running with just a 3/8-inch suction line from the evaporator. You're not going to get enough refrigerant velocity to bring oil back up to that system. So in my situation on those Hvacr rack systems, you're just going to take an evaporator out of the picture. I was actually surprised that when I pulled the power head off that I didn't get oil draining out of the expansion valve. I've heard of people drilling into evaporator coils. I've never had to drill into an evaporator coil, but I guess that's a method you could do. Find the lowest spot on the evaporator coil, drill a hole in a spot where you can sand it up and braze it. I guess that's a possibility too. On that particular system, you just got to change the compressor every couple of years and hope that all the oil doesn't return back up. And when you have oil issues, you just change an evaporator coil. Most of the oil will probably logged inside that evaporator coil. So let's see. D-Rod 205. What length of rise until you put an oil trap? 15 foot or more, like 25. I mean, in a perfect world, anything more than like 10, 15 feet, you're going to have an oil trap in there or a suction P trap. Sometimes we can't put them in because of certain situations, but most of the time, anytime I'm putting in a walk-in evaporator coil, I'm going to have try to have a suction P trap in there downstairs. So anytime on the rise, just throw a suction P trap. It's not going to hurt to throw a suction P trap on a system that doesn't need one either. It's just some extra piping. Go for it. Zach Trudeau, symptoms of an oil-logged evaporator. That's a really hard one. Oil-logged evaporators are one of the hardest things to diagnose. In my situations, most of the time, I mean, if you've done everything that you can, you know that the expansion valves are working, you've just got no temperature differential across the evaporator. Oil-logged evaporators are really hard to diagnose, you know. Holy crap, someone just put in a super chat. Jonathan, dude, thank you very much. I really appreciate that super chat. That was really awesome of you, Jonathan. Thank you so very much, man. You guys blow me away with those things. So can I explain why some TXVs have an external equalizer and why some don't? Okay, the easiest way to understand an external equalizer is if the system has multiple circuits. So let's say you have an evaporator coil. If you can picture a walk-in cooler evaporator coil. A walk-in cooler evaporator coil is going to have a distributor coming off the expansion valve, and it's going to have multiple distribution lines going to the expansion valve, going to the evaporator coil. Anytime you have a distributor, it's safe to say you need an externally equalized expansion valve, okay? I'll try to do a cutaway. It's very difficult, but I'll try to do a cutaway of an expansion valve that has an externally equalized port coming out of it, okay? Essentially, it's just another port that comes onto the top of the valve and helps the valve to open and close properly, okay? There's a lot more to that. Let's see. Send me an email, blurred1322, and I'll try to send you some documentation from Sporland that'll better explain the external equalizers, okay? Okay, so Adam Showers, you said you saw a refrigeration system with 2 receiver dryers instead of 1. What do you mean receiver dryers? You mean liquid line dryers? I I'm kind of curious about that, Adam. If I can't answer your question in here, send me an email. Any of you guys that want to send me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. I'll try to get to them, okay? I need a little more context there, Jonathan or Adam. Let's see what else. I really appreciate you guys. You guys are awesome in here. So, all right. Let me see what else is on my list right here. I covered that. I covered head pressure control valves. Oh, okay, guys. I got a really important one for you guys. Big picture diagnosis. That's kind of my phrase that I live by. Big picture diagnosis. Looking at the big picture, solving the problem, not the symptom. Oftentimes, the symptom is someone calls you and says, my reach-in's not working, you know, and it's really easy to walk up and say, oh, this is really easy. This is your problem. But why did that problem happen? Okay. So I'm going to play a little video right now, and hopefully it comes across well. This is a situation where I had another service tech, and I don't fault him for not catching this problem. This was a difficult one, but it's also, when it was all said and done, it was a really easy problem. But oftentimes when we're working in restaurants, we get other people working in there, and people come in and modify equipment, and they think they're doing well and they mean well, but they screw things up. Okay. So I'm going to play a video right now of a situation where looking at the big picture, okay, led to a diagnosis that totally explained what was going on. So what I'm going to do, and let's see if I can show this. This is like a minute long video clip that I couldn't really make a video out of, and I want to show you guys. So what I'm going to do is start this over. I'm going to turn this up, and I'm going to display capture, and hopefully you guys can tell me if the audio comes through. I'm going to go ahead and transition this over. You guys should still be able to hear me, and I'm going to go ahead and play a video right now. And this is a situation, again, where big picture diagnosis, okay? They complained that the right side of their bar coolers wasn't working. And when I realized what happened, it was because someone made an installation error. So I'm going to play this video right now. Okay, so today we've got a glass tender cooler that's temping at 36. But here's the problem. This is the evaporator. The air comes out the top and blows across the top of the box. Well, they did a bar remodel here. There's supposed to be a channel. It sits right here, and it's kind of a cruddy design, but there's supposed to be a channel that directs the airflow all the way down to the other side of the box. And they added all these beer taps and this trough, and when they did that, they took out the channel. And now it's not working. It's been that way for a while, actually. So you can see, because that's at 38, and this side over here, where the channel is supposed to direct the air, is at 45. Well, what I had to do is install this booster motor right here that basically blows 100 CFMs, and it pulls the air from here and blows it and dumps it all the way down to the other end. Right there. So we're going to see if this solves our problem. This is what happens when the beer people come in and try to modify refrigerators. Now this is the refrigerator next to it that hasn't been, and see this channel, this whole chase right here, it's open right here. Air goes through, and then it just dumps all the way at the other end. See, it's open, and then the air is coming out of there. But they took it upon themselves to remove that because they needed to put all their beer stuff in. So this is the region next to it that doesn't have beer taps, basically. All right, so that's an example of a situation where the customer had someone else come in, and they modified the box and basically took out the chase that blew the air all the way across the box. So when we got a service call out there, we had a service tech that basically said, hey, the box is working, it's down to temp. But again, big picture diagnosis, looking at everything, stepping back. And it's really easy to not see that someone had come in and modified that box and took that chase out that allowed the air to get all the way across the top. Okay. So it's always the best thing to go ahead and step back. If we're having a hard time, if something seems like, hey, wait, this isn't right, step back and look at the big picture. it's really going to help you guys in understanding the way that things work and diagnosing things. Big picture diagnosis is my motto. It's very important, and I think it'll really, really help. And the little fan, Bill Burnett, worked out really well. Zach, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate that for that super chat, Zach. That was awesome, bud. Bill, yeah, the fan worked out. The customer, I did that little clip probably about 4 months ago, and they haven't complained since. And that was actually from the manufacturer. It's a Granger motor, but the manufacturer Glass Tender has that little retrofit kit to move that air all the way. It was actually meant to blow the air up into the beer taps, but I used it kind of in the opposite to get air all the way over to the other side of the box. So, again, Zach, dude, awesome super chat, man. Thank you so very much. So, all right. Justin says, where did that one thumbs down come from? Zach made me laugh one time when he said that the thumbs down come from the Tiny Wiener Brigade. Okay, I still think of that. Every time I see a thumbs down, I think of the Tiny Wiener Brigade, and that's the people that gives the thumbs down to the videos. So I have about my number, of course, as you grow in subscribers and viewers, right, you're going to get more people that give a thumbs down. Now, guys, just so you know, a thumbs down really isn't the end of the world. YouTube doesn't really see a difference between a thumbs up and a thumbs down. They see interaction. To YouTube, interaction is people that are going to watch their commercials. So, you know, it is what it is. But I find it so funny when Zach said the Tiny Wiener Brigade. I still think of those people. So every time I see a thumbs down, I think of the Tiny Wiener Brigade. Okay, Chris Cooley, you asked, what's my preference for the R290 pinch-off tool? So I like the vice grip style pinch-off tool. It's done me well. It's the easiest one. I personally don't like the one that you got to tighten the wing nuts on and tighten it down. So if that's what you're asking, that I just use the vice grip style, man. And it works well for me. Oftentimes in certain situations, I found that the pinch off tool can actually almost sever the copper line. So I'll lay a braze joint right across it when I'm done. I haven't showed that on video, but I'll take basically after I've pinched it off, I'll just take the solder from the 15% Silphos and just kind of do a drip onto the braze, the pinch point, and then just let it with the torch, just kind of wave it across a couple times and let it just liquefy. And then it strengthens that pinch point. But yeah, I use the vice grip style pinch off tool. So does the suction oil P-trap work on the same principle as a condensate P-trap? Negative pressure. No. Suction P-trap is there to increase refrigerant velocity. So as the suction P-trap, what it does is as the refrigerant flows through the P-trap, it flows through, then it has to go down and then back up. And the theory is that as it goes down, the velocity of the refrigerant speeds up. And theoretically, it picks up any oil droplets and drives them up faster up to the roof. Now, there's a lot about piping the system that really affects the way a suction P-trap works. I would highly suggest you guys get the Copeland manual. Hold on. I actually think that there's a link inside the video, but let me get my manual right now. So in the Copeland, this is the Copeland refrigeration manual. There should be a link in the show notes of this video, but it talks about proper piping. So this is my book from when I went to school. And I have little tabs that I had put in here when I was going through systems and how to design systems. So I have fitting length, pressure drop, discharge oil return, suction line return. And if you click on the suction line returns, it basically has some diagrams, and it tells you based off of capacity, system BTUs, and evaporator temperatures, it tells you how to size suction lines properly. And where that comes in is suction line sizing, is that basically you're going to change your suction line sizing on the vertical and on the horizontal, and it's going to help your oil return, basically, okay? So there's a lot more to the system than just adding a suction line P-trap. You also have the line has to be sized properly to allow the refrigerant velocity to help return the oil back to there. But it does not work quite like a P-trap on a drain. Okay, a P-trap on a drain is there to prevent sewer gases and or to help the negative air pressure from pulling the trap dry, essentially, okay? But a P-trap on a refrigeration system is there to help oil return, not sewer gases, in a drain line. Okay. That is a great question though, because I guess for someone that doesn't quite understand refrigeration, they see a P trap and they think the same thing. So let's see what else. Gentlemen, there is a ton of guys that make YouTube videos much better than I. Okay. There's all kinds of great content on YouTube. I'd highly suggest you guys check it out. I don't subscribe to all the great channels, not necessarily. There's some new channels too, but if you look on my channel, my YouTube channel, there's a way to look at who I subscribe to, and you guys can see, what videos I watch. Now, I will say that I also subscribe to a couple people that are kind of shady just because I like to watch their videos. So you guys can kind of go through and figure it out on your own, which ones are great channels and which ones are bad channels. But I will say for the most part, I don't think any of the bad channels pop up in this chat. There's lots of guys in here. HVAC Shop Talk, HVAC Overtime, HVACR Vlogger, Curious HVAC Guy, HVACR North. There's a bunch of different guys inside of here that have great YouTube channels. There's lots of great content out there. I suggest you guys go give those guys a subscription, give them some views, okay, and help them out too. Let's see what else. Let me see. Can I explain saturated coil temperature, Sean? Sean, that's something that I need to kind of prepare a little bit more to kind of properly explain the saturated coil temperatures, especially with the way that the refrigerant glide works. Okay, that's a whole nother thing that I can't explain off the top of my head. Okay. What I would suggest, Sean, is send me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I will try and prepare some notes to kind of properly explain that a little bit more. I would also say that anything that I have a hard time explaining, I would suggest you guys go search over at HVACR School. Mr. Brian Orr, my buddy, produces great content on there, and he does a really good job of making his podcasts and his tech tips. And a lot of times there's things that I can't explain that he explains really well over on his channel too. Okay. But again, Sean, go ahead and send me an email and I'll try to, explain that a little bit better for you. Okay. Let's see what else. Thank you very much, Jesse H. Really appreciate it, bud. All right. Let me go through my list here. I covered that. Okay, so I got another question for you guys. So you guys know that Sporlan is my sponsor. You see it on the beginning of every one of my videos. Sporlan is a really cool sponsor, okay? The reason why I say that is because they don't require a lot of me, but I agree with all the products that they make, okay? They're not someone that sells snake oils per se and different things like that. They sent me their new BQ kit. I kind of talked about it back here. I'll show it right now. So this is essentially, they already have expansion valve kit. This right here, and I showed this on my last stream, but I have some questions about it and I want to ask your guys' opinion. So this kit basically gives you the ability to make almost any expansion valve. So you have the different bodies, you have the different power heads, you basically have the different cartridges, and you can build almost any valve, all different types of tonnages and different things, okay? I utilize one of these kits. It's called a BQ kit. So Sporlan isn't changing the kit. The kit's still the same. They've always had their BQ or their B valves, but they came out with this this giant case basically that is much more heavy duty, okay? So it's really just a new case. The kit is still the same. So Sporlan's question, and my only, and I wouldn't say it's a criticism because I really like this kit in this case. The case is kind of like a, I don't know, whatever, a waterproof, you know, it has a vacuum breaker on it. So it's an airproof case, whatever. The only thing I mentioned to them, because they were asking me, my contact at Sporlan was saying, hey, how do you like the case? What do you think? And I think it's a great case. I think it's awesome. The only thing that I find difficult about the case is that it doesn't necessarily fit in my van shelf. So what I mean is when you slide it down, it doesn't fit down into the little notch in the shelf, you know, the 2-inch notch that basically your parts all sit behind so they don't slide off the shelf. So for me, that's not a big deal. I basically slide that. I have a couple different cases, right? Their old case fit down and it fit perfect, but this new one's a little bit big. But I have a couple cases that I stack, and I basically have a bungee cord that runs from the top down to the bottom and it holds the cases in. So the only thing, they were asking me, what are your criticisms? What are your problems? And the only thing I told them was, hey, it doesn't fit on a standard van shelf. It fits in there. It just doesn't lock in place. You have to have some kind of a bungee or something to hold it shut. So the question that I posed to you guys, how important is that? Do you guys have cases that you set on your van shelves that you have to put a bungee across? So in my situation, it's not that big of a deal because I already have a spot where I put bungees in there. So I just put that case on there and the bungee holds it from sliding out. What do you guys feel about that? Do you guys feel that, their kit should necessarily be able to fit down in that little slot on the van shelf? Or do you think that a bungee, in my opinion, the bungee is just fine, but they're kind of doing a little bit different on their beta testing. So they sent me the case and they told me to show you guys everything. And they said, ask you guys what your opinions are before they release that into full release. So what do you guys think? Do you think that should be able to fit on a shelf perfectly? Or do you feel that a bungee going across the shelf will hold that in and it'll be just fine? I'm kind of curious what you guys have to think about that. So, Sean, can I explain how to use the dial-a-charge behind me? Sean, I'm going to be honest with you. One of my technicians, actually named Sean, that used to work for me, gave me that dial-a-charge. I believe his dad had found it at a garage sale. So I have never used a dial-a-charge, but I understand the concept of it, okay? So essentially, as you add refrigerant to the system, the refrigerant level is going to be indicated within a sight glass that's behind this plastic marker right here. And what you would do is you would find the different, so this one right here only work for R12, R22, and 502. And you would basically use a conversion chart here. And it would tell you, this was before scales were super accurate. You could find the number and basically use your conversion chart and find out the exact, based off the gradient levels, the exact amount of refrigerant that was in this. And then you could charge the system with that exact amount of refrigerant. So this was quickly replaced when we had highly accurate digital scales that came out, when we could measure down into the ounces and grams versus when our scales weren't very accurate and they weren't digital. And we were able, so this was basically used on critically charged systems where you could view the liquid level within the sight glass and do a conversion and find out exactly how much refrigerant was in the system and how much you put in the system, okay? So this was replaced by the digital scale, essentially, okay? Yeah, I bungee them too, so I really don't see any issue. Okay, more compact. Okay, that's interesting. All right. Yeah, I'd be kind of curious to see what you guys think. So it does look like a hookah there, Justin, huh? All right, gentlemen, any questions that I forgot or didn't get to, throw them down in here and I'll try to answer them as best as possible, okay? How important is understanding and using psychrometrics in your day-to-day work? Quinn Denihi. Hopefully I pronounced your last name right. So psychrometrics is the fundamentals of the HVAC trade. Okay, I will say that we don't use psychrometrics per se in the refrigeration side as much. It is still a very valid thing to understand. But as far as the science behind psychrometrics, it's best if you understand it. I honestly didn't start to understand psychrometrics until about 10 years into my career. So I got by just fine for the first 10 years. And once I understood psychrometrics, it really helps you to understand how to check capacity in systems and different things like that, and help you to understand what the refrigerant is doing because the airflow is slowing down or the airflow is speeding up. So it is a very important thing to understand, but I will say for the common HVAC guy or the common refrigeration guy, you're not going to necessarily use psychrometric calculations every single day. But a general understanding of the psychrometric process and what is involved in moving the air properly and what the lack of airflow or too much airflow does to a system is very important, and it will help you, okay? So the complete scientific understanding of psychrometrics and understanding every term and all that different stuff, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you really don't need to know all of that, but a general understanding of, less airflow, less heat transfer, that kind of stuff is very important, okay? I will say that psychrometrics definitely becomes more interesting as you get older in the trade, and then you start to realize, oh, that happened because the airflow is low? Oh, that makes sense, or, vice versa. So, all right. Mr. Ice, at what point do you recommend a replacement versus a repair mainly for reach-ins? I'll tell you right now. I don't sell refrigerators to my customers. So this is actually the best way for me to recommend a replacement. I don't sell refrigerators. If a customer wants to buy a refrigerator, in the past, I've tried to purchase refrigerators, but there's so many people out there that sell them cheaper than I just don't even do it anymore. I just fix things. Okay. I'll sell a package unit every once in a while, but even that I don't do very much. So it's really easy. When I'm not selling the refrigerator to the customer and I tell them, hey, it's time to replace, I'm not making a penny if they replace it. And I make sure I point that out to them. And then if they still choose to fix it, then hey, I'm going to make a profit when I fix it and move on. I deal with chain restaurants. Depending on the particular chain, some chain restaurants really like to change equipment on a regular basis. Some don't. So oftentimes, I have restaurant customers that don't want to change anything. So I'd say, hey, I highly recommend you don't repair this unit, but here's the price if you want to repair it. And most of the time they choose to repair it. Okay. I have another restaurant customer that it's a chain restaurant and they buy Dellfield equipment and man, they change that stuff every 3 years. Right when the 3-year warranty expires, boom. Between 3 and 5 years, they're buying a new refrigerator. And, so I just basically present them with the facts and I let them make the decisions. Hey, I highly recommend you change it, but if you don't want to, here's the price to fix it. You guys choose what you want to do. And I just let them make the decision. Okay. So usually I look at the warranty period. If it's out of warranty, then I'll just tell them, hey, it's out of warranty. And I'll just present them with the facts. It's going to cost this much to fix. And they know how much it costs to buy a new one. And then they just buy a new one usually, is most of the time. So let's see what else. All right. Justin P, you fought with a fryer pump today that wouldn't pump the oil back into the vat. Pain in the ass. Yeah, honestly, I don't do any hot side work, so I've heard nothing but headaches about fryer units, and the oil pumps and different things, but never worked on them. So, all right, let's see what else we got going on in here, guys. Yeah, kind of the same thing here. Prime time. Clients usually buy the reach-ins themselves, and I'll sell walk-in retrofits. Like I don't sell an entire walk-in. I don't do construction like that, but I'll sell evaporators and condensing units. So I'll sell them that kind of stuff. But I even have some customers that buy their own walk-in equipment. So, it's just one of those things when you deal with chain restaurants. What's my opinion on capsule pack units, especially freezer units? Honestly, Chris Cooley, I don't deal with much capsule pack if I'm understanding you correctly. And those are like where you've got a walk-in unit with a condensing unit with an evaporator. And it's just like a unit that you cut a hole in the top of the walk-in and it sits on top. I don't deal with those very much, so I can't really say too much. I do know, if my understanding is correct about the capsule pack units, they use them on subways a lot. Don't work for any of those guys, so I don't deal with them. So, no, Sean, I've never had any geothermal experience. Sorry, bud. What is my email? You have an issue. Adam Showers. It is hvacrvideos@gmail.com. I'll post it in the chat right now. Hopefully I typed that email right. Yeah, it looks like I did. So, let me see what else. Viewer activity. Right on. So I'm doing something new. I downloaded a plugin and I'm monitoring the entire chat this time because I often find that there's a lot of questions that go unanswered in the chat. So hopefully if this little plugin that I downloaded right, it's basically recording the entire chat and I'm going to be able to go through it after and see if I missed anything. So hopefully that works. I don't know though, because it's not popping up in there. Oh yeah, it's saving it. So yeah, it's saving all the chat. So hopefully I can answer all your guys' questions there. Let's see what else. I've gotten everything off my list. So, KMD, I hate the KMD units, man. The KMD units are those weird ass units. They're a pain in the butt. All right, gentlemen, I am going to wrap this up. I really appreciate. So Sean, you said, did I say Silphos 50% silver? Did I mean 15%? If I did say 50%, that was a mistake because I used 15% Silphos and then I used 56% silver solder is the two brazing rods that I use. So if I did say 50%, that was definitely a mistake. So, all right, gentlemen, I'm going to wrap this up. I really, really appreciate you guys coming in here. Thank you so very much for taking the time to come into this. and I'm going to transition on out of here. And any questions you guys have, hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I will catch you guys on the next one.